All right. So yesterday I asked you guys to end off on this, doing a little bit of an exit ticket, and I read through most of them. I still got a couple more to read through, but I want to talk about this together and basically this DIY treaty proposal. That I posed these three questions to you guys to reflect upon World War I as a whole, everything that we know, everything basically from the beginning to end, and talk about how do we make peace for the future, basically. Okay. I really just want to know what your guys' thoughts were on these last two. So when you guys were creating your DIY treaty proposal, you guys can just kind of be brave. I'm sure you guys have, I know you guys actually have, a lot of awesome ideas when it came to this. Somebody be brave. Talk about what you guys were thinking when it came to war reparations. So payment for damages, who's responsible for what are we going to do? Yeah, Nick.
For the payment stuff, I said the people
Guys,
you should pay for your own damages because if you had enough money to join the war, you should have enough money to fix it.
ooh, I like that train of thought that if you had enough money to join the war, you should have enough money to fix it after you're done. So whatever damages that you've done, you have to pay for. Interesting. I like it. Emerson. Ladies, shh. We've started. Okay. So basically, there should be some kind of like percentage. Like the Allies were basically trying to stop the Central Powers. They should have to pay for less, but somebody should be paying for a decent amount versus whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so like if we think about the Allied powers and those quote 23 other countries that are like colonies and stuff like that, they just got roped into it. They didn't have to do anything, so maybe they shouldn't have to pay as much, right? Trey.
Central powers pay for 75% of it and it gets evenly distributed the payment.
25, 25, 25. Yeah. Yeah.
And there can be exceptions based on your economy. So if their economy is about to collapse, then they don't have to pay as much because rebuilding would be more important than repaying.
Yeah, so 75% of the damages, no matter what it may be, whether it's physical construction damages or like physical, emotional damages, whatever, 75% needs to be by the central powers, 25 each. But there's exceptions on if, like, if my economy is hanging on by a thread, I'm not expected to pay back that quite yet. I need to focus on myself first, then we'll get to that. Yeah. Ryan.
Basically factoring in economy as I said, but also like war losses.
Mm-hmm.
Based on how many losses you made in the war, you're definitely going to have an impact on your economy and your profit because most people in the war are probably not in the war all the time.
Yeah.
And so all of those hardworking people that you've lost, you kind of pay less depending on how
yeah. So let's say even though like I'm Germany or something like that, Germany loses like 3 million people, but 2 million of those people are civilians that contribute to my workforce. How am I supposed to keep my economy up when everyone who is in my workforce is dead? Okay. So there needs to be some kind of like exception or some kind of working around of those types of things as well. Okay. I think those are all fantastic ideas. I think you guys are hitting a lot of different check boxes basically, or a lot of different points when it comes to this. What about maintaining peace for the future? So like somebody's got to pay for something. How do we make sure that we're peaceful in the future? You can talk about this first question as well, but basically, how do we move forward? How do we go on from this? Aiden.
maybe like some sort of like truce.
So some kind of treaty, some kind of truce, just saying like we got to move past this. We got to chill, basically. Okay, Sean.
Get rid of the guns.
Get rid of guns, maybe for a little bit of time. Okay, or at least maybe some kind of sanction on weapons for certain people. Okay, I can get with it. Nick.
We're blowing up other countries' ships when they're trying to go to your country.
No.
Especially ones with civilians.
No more targeting civilians. That's a good point. Maybe keep the unrestricted submarine warfare to a minimum. I agree with that. Ryan.
Make a force treaty between all of the big powers in Europe, Eurasia, where all of those big countries depend on each other for necessities of produce such as technology, food, clothing, things like that, so that if any one of those countries were to attack another,
Yeah.
then they would be losing a necessity that they required to survive and would have to acquire it some other way.
So
So basically, a trade system between all of the different countries.
basically, whether or not I was your ally or your enemy during the war, we need to be dependable upon each other so that if one goes down, all of them go down. That's kind of a way to keep us up and running, kind of. Okay, Trey?
Kind of like partly occupy the major central powers and set up, like demilitarize them and set up programs to like de-radicalize their populace. So they
Yeah.
like to start another war once their military gets built back up.
Yeah, so kind of moving off of like take away the guns and stuff like that, demilitarize the people who were being naughty in the first place, or kind of demilitarize the people who were the most aggressive. Set up something so that their people just can't revolt again and start another war. That's the biggest causer of wars. Did you know that? Other wars. So we need to make sure that the people in these countries are kind of all on board and that there's not going to be like a revolution or something, and we can move forward with peace instead of moving forward with more hatred and resentment. That's a big thing that'll come back to kind of bite us in the butt. Kyle, did you have something else you wanted to add to it?
Yeah.
Okay. Assassination seems to be a big deal here. How about we just stop assassinating each other, right? Or like a lot of damages or a lot of like slaps on the wrist if you keep assassinating people. I agree. I think that's a good one. Ryan, last comment. You got it. Okay, Emerson, I think you were going for it. No, I've made you guys mess up. Yeah. Yeah. So the leaders need to get together and form some kind of agreement that also involves the peace of the people, and they need to continue to upkeep it, basically. Okay, I like it. I know you guys have such good ideas. We got to move forward, okay? I think you guys hit all the checkpoints again. Like I said, I got a couple more to read, but I think you guys did really well on this little exit ticket. Thank you very much for being brave and sharing your ideas. So we have kind of come up with our own DIY treaty proposals, or we've come up with what we would like to see happen after a major event like this if we were to put ourselves in those people's shoes. But today we're going to talk about what basically the options were for moving forward and answering those questions. So there's two different documents that we are basically going to look at and see what's happening within the Treaty of Versailles and Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, okay? So one of them is a very American treaty. One of them, so Woodrow Wilson's 14 points comes out of America. It's Woodrow Wilson's solution to the things that are happening versus the Treaty of Versailles, which was a more global cooperation, a more global outlook. Oh, excuse me, and eventually what we're going to go with, okay? So we're going to look at both of those pieces of documents or both of those pieces of primary sources, talk about what's the same, what's different, how you guys feel about it, how the world feels about them, okay? That is the goal for today. All right, so when it comes to basically the lead up of these two pieces of information or these two documents, we have to kind of put ourselves back in the time period or put ourselves back in that place in history. World War I is over. Now we need to start making decisions to move forward. And the first thing that has to happen is basically these big three of these political leaders or the leaders of these countries need to get together and decide what to do. The big three meaning the big three of the Allied powers. So those three are going to be Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, George Clemenceau, who was the like President, Prime Minister, whatever, of France, and David Lloyd George, who is the Prime Minister of the UK, Britain, okay? Yeah.
Back then, if he was the prime minister, then who was the president for UK?
Yeah, UK doesn't have a president. They have a monarchy. So they have like a king and a queen, and then they have a prime minister, which runs like the lawmaking side of things. Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
while the prime minister would be intertwined making those
Mhm.
decisions, would they have to run it by the monarchy before it actually?
Yes and no. They can run it by them and just be like, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and then basically the king and queen just have to go, okay, sounds good. They are a figurehead for the people.
So they're kind of, they're equals in a lot of, they're
Yeah.
equals in a lot of
So like,
ways.
let's take a look at like the UK today. So like the Queen of England has a lot of power, basically the same amount of power as the Prime Minister right now, which is Boris Johnson. But Boris Johnson makes a lot of the legislative decisions versus the Queen of England, who's basically just the spearhead. She's the figurehead. She is a figure to look up to, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. She holds the same power in terms of like the commander in chief does for the presidency. So like if she decides like we are going to make a major, military decision or a major political decision, they have to answer to her. Yeah. I know it sounds like I'm just like, oh, the queen is just like, she's like a pawn or something. She holds a lot of power. She's still the queen. They just work a little bit different than we do. So the big three of basically the Allied powers, the United States, France, and the UK, all come together and they meet in Paris to decide or try and decide some kind of treaty or some kind of proposal to get the Central Powers back on board and move forward by basically answering all the questions that we tried to answer yesterday. Okay. So what do they want? So what are they coming into this meeting with? This meeting or this conference in Paris, what are they going into it with? Okay. George Clemenceau, the leader of France, or the big three from France, has a lot of strong feelings. Okay. France in general has had a really tough relationship with Germany before World War I. And then at the start of World War I, Germany like immediately targets France. And really, France took a lot of offense to that, okay? What's that meme? Isn't it like Michael Jordan? Like, I took offense to that. I took a lot of offense to that. That's how France is feeling, okay? Yeah. A little bit, yes, but we run off of a lot of emotions after the war and during war. War is just a lot of emotions.
Well, because Germany lost, and so they're automatically going to take the brunt of this war. So whether or not you hate them for it, they're still going to suffer.
So basically, like France, UK, and the United States all have to come in with something, and they're eventually going to boil it down to something that everybody enjoys. So France is thinking, well, I might as well come in kind of hot, and then they're going to neutralize me anyway. So I just want to make my opinions known real quick before we go back to where we need to be. Does that make sense? Yeah. So George Clemenceau and France kind of come in with this feeling of like, God, we really hate Germany. I feel like they are completely targeting us, et cetera, et cetera. They believe that Germany needs to take, like Ryan said, a brunt of this damages or a brunt of the blame. And they need to pay for the damages specifically done in France. That Germany needs to weaken their army and their military so that France would not be invaded again, and everyone, but from a French perspective, so they wouldn't be invaded again. And they just believed in like general punishment, that it's Germany's fault and they need to be punished for it. In France's mind, if you look back to the very beginning, basically after the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and even before, Germany is the aggressor. Germany is the one to blame. They have to be punished for it, okay? So they're coming in kind of strong on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, David Lloyd George and Britain and the UK, kind of, being the regalness of the UK, said, that he would, quote, make Germany pay because he knew that's what the British people wanted to hear, but that's not actually how he felt. He's coming in kind of on a softer side, that there should be justice, but not revenge, okay? That France is looking for revenge, that France is looking to make a statement and basically like beat the crap out of Germany after the fact, right? But David Lloyd George says, no, that's not how we should do this. They should have justice for the lives that are lost and the damage that has been done, but we can't have revenge. Revenge involves like more emotions, and that's just going to make them mad, okay? That if we have a harsh peace, that if we have basically peace with harsh punishments, that it will cause Germany to be resentful and those other central powered countries to be resentful, which will lead to more war. So we have to keep things basically neutral. Okay? That we need to play the middle ground between France and the United States, or play some kind of middle ground as to not upset the Central Powers more and dive us back into war. Ryan, what were you going to say?
Didn't Germany already lose a lot of lives during the war because of the blockade?
Yeah. That's what, like, everyone lost a lot of people. So UK is basically trying to say, why are we going to punish them more than what's already been punished? It's just going to make them hate us more. They already hate us. Why would we make them hate us more?
After losing 3 million people?
Ish, yeah.
So after losing about 3 million people, more than half of those people are going to be workforce people, probably providing necessities like food or clothing. And so the economy is already going to fail.
Yeah. That's basically what David Lloyd George is trying to say, is that why would we, war is war for a reason. There is a punishment that automatically comes with war. Why would we push that to make them not only suffer more, but hate us more? That's not solving anything. So on basically the opposite spectrum of France, France really wants revenge. They want to make a mockery out of Germany. They want to make sure that they are being heard in this conversation. But the UK is going to come in and kind of soften them down and say, hey, we can't do that. There will be punishment because losers are still losers, but we can't create resentment. That's going to cause a lot of problems. Huh? Oh yeah, if they would have got that would be an interesting point of view if they went through with like France's point of view. Yeah. Just like, listen, we're just gonna put you in jail for however long. Yeah. Okay, so George Clemenceau in France has one opinion, David Lloyd George in the UK has another opinion. The United States also has an opinion on this as well. And Woodrow Wilson puts a lot of thought into how we should react after the war is over. Not only because it was a very like touchy subject, basically, that we're a world power, we are trying to emerge as the world power. We need to have a good stance on this, but also because we had time to, right? When we weren't involved in the war, when we hadn't officially entered yet, we were watching this all happen. And Woodrow Wilson is basically thinking to himself, okay, when this is over, we got to have a plan. So he's been working on his plan much longer than these other two have, right? So Woodrow Wilson basically comes up with his plan called the 14 points. Okay? Wilson has the 14 points. And the main goal of Woodrow Wilson's 14 points was that Wilson wanted peace without victory. Okay? Peace without victory has about the same vibe as, peace without resentment or no harsh peace. But basically saying the way that we move to peace is that nobody should be labeled a loser. Nobody should be labeled a winner. We need to just take responsibility for what has happened as a whole and move forward, okay? He drew up these 14 points to take to the peace conference in Paris, but that he had been working on them for a long time, kind of perfecting the different things that he wanted to see happen. And these were his terms and agreements to end World War I and to prevent future wars. So like I said, he was working on this. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. He was working on this before the war had even ended. So some of his points basically allude to the fact that there is still something to be done before the war is completely over, and then we move forward, okay? The baby of Wilson's 14 points, the part that he spent the most time on perfecting and the most time trying to push was the League of Nations, or some kind of League of Nations, which is a group of nations, or what he thought would be a group of nations that would work to maintain world peace through a longer period of time. So the major powers would come together and work to maintain peace over an extended period of time. Okay, so as you're finishing up the slide, I'm going to hand to you a copy of his 14 points. We're going to look at them together as a group, but also this needs to stay with your notes so you don't have to write them all down. Okay. Perfect amount. Oh, I have one extra. No, I didn't. Killing it. Love it when that happens.
But one day during the beginning of the year, their first time everything's gone.
Oh yeah.
That's like the first time you didn't have to
When you see them celebrating, they get all their things that were going.
I didn't even count. I just gave them out. That's the real victory. Not that I counted and got it right, that I didn't count and still got it right.
It's like when you do when you try to win a game a lot of
All right. So as you're finishing up this slide, I want to read through the first little background information with you, and then we'll read through the 14 points. Okay. So the 14 points was a speech, or originally a speech delivered by the United States President Woodrow Wilson to Congress during World War I. The address was intended to assure the U.S. in the Great War, or that the Great War was being fought for a just cause, and that the post-war peace in Europe, and for post-war peace in Europe. Citizens in Europe generally welcomed Wilson's ideas, but Allied leaders were skeptical of the possibility of these ideas happening. So again, Woodrow Wilson has been working on these for a long time. He originally gives this speech to Congress way before the war is even over, and then continues to work on it after the war had ended and after we had entered the war, basically. Okay. The speech was delivered over 10 months before the armistice with the German Empire ended, the Great War. But the 14 points became the basis for the terms of the German surrender as negotiated at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. The Treaty of Versailles, however, had little to do with the 14 points and was never ratified by the US Senate. We'll talk about the Treaty of Versailles in just a little bit. Okay? The 14-point speech was the only explicit open statement of war goals by any of the other nations fighting in World War I. Some countries involved gave general indications of their goals. Still, others secretly wanted to gain foreign territory and so refused to state their goals openly. So basically, until the war is officially over, nobody knew what any of these countries would eventually gain from the end or how it would look at the end. Woodrow Wilson is the only person that had goals of ending this and goals of world peace, which said a lot about the United States. Okay? Many secret deals were made between nations that made accepting Wilson's points impossible. So some of the things you see in the 14 points are not going to transfer to the Treaty of Versailles just because it wasn't going to be possible with the secret deals that are happening. Okay. All right, so if we look through these 14 points, I'll have them up here as well. They're a little bit different than the ones in front of you. The one that's in front of you is simplified just a little bit further than what I have up here. But let's read through them together. So number one, all treaties between countries must be made public with no secret agreements for all nations to observe. You should not be having secret alliances with people. You should be open and honest with the rest of the world as to who are your friends, who are not your friends, all of that fun stuff, okay? Number two, freedom of navigation upon the seas outside territorial waters during both peace and war, except as those seas may be closed in whole or in part by international, et cetera, for the enforcement of international agreements. So basically, I can sail the open seas without fear of being blown up. Yes, Ryan?
How do you define what is water territory?
Basically, it goes between islands, other different things. Yeah, they have specific like Navy maritime borders, like Trey said, that like, you know, some people can go in, some people cannot. But basically, this point in the 14 points is saying there shouldn't be that. I should be able to go basically anytime I want in the open water and not be afraid to be blown up.
Unless you're like,
unless I'm straight up trying to blow somebody else up, then yeah.
Like, you're just cruising your destroyer across like someone else's territory.
Another great white fleet. Basically, like, I should be able to go wherever I want without anybody blowing me up.
But like, if someone did that, would the country be, I don't want to say invaded because they're not really being pushed against? Would they have the rights to attack that ship?
Theoretically, but to stay out of war, we're not going to. You know what I mean? Yeah, Sean.
Is it possible for the Allies to have a water battle? Water in the water?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We can have wartime battle, or like we can have navy battles, basically all the time.
Yeah, they won't know.
All right, so number 3, the removal of economic barriers between countries, making trade unfair among all nations, consenting to the peace and associating themselves for the maintain of peace. So basically, tariffs, if you're peaceful and agree to this, go away. We shouldn't have any other economic barriers on trade and other things to help out other countries, okay? Number 4, the reduction of arms worldwide to the lowest point consistent with maintaining domestic safety. Nobody should have 1,500 destroyer boats. That is too much. You don't need that for domestic safety. You shouldn't have millions and millions of soldiers just ready to go. That's too much. You don't need that. This just in case army idea, the militarism of our main causes needs to come to an end. We need to back it up, okay? Number 5, the open-minded adjustment of all colonial claims based on the principle that in determining all such questions, rule of interest, populations, et cetera, get rid of your colonies. Imperialism needs to be shut down, or at least you need to get rid of most of them. There is no reason that Britain should own 25% of the world, okay? That's a huge deal to say that openly in the middle of a war, let alone in general, that you need to get rid of your colonies. That's a big deal. And that colonies deserve independence. That's a big deal.
What does sound like you're being British being being treated as their own house during the war?
Yeah, right. It sounds like we're kind of being like, Britain, you got problems, you need to solve them, which we are. So oh yeah, like it's for the Central Powers, but it also sheds light on the things that the Allied powers are doing too. Yeah. 6, 7, and 8 is all about giving territory back that was previously conquered. So Russian territory belongs to Russia. Belgium needs to be independent again. The Alsace-Lorraine, which was territory given to Germany to kind of get them to shut up, basically, should be given back to France. All of this stuff needs to be given back, okay? We didn't lose any territory, nothing with the United States, but a lot of stuff in Europe was taken, given back, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with 9, that Italy needs to be adjusted, their borders along Italian nationality. That was basically just to make Italy happy. The people of Austria-Hungary should be given the freest opportunity to autonomous self-chosen government. No Austria-Hungarian Empire, the country of Austria-Hungary. So independent nations, not empires. Romania, Serbia, all of these other countries given away by the Central Powers, again, deserves to be free. The people of the Ottoman Empire should be given a voice in determining self-government, again, independent nations. Number 13, in independent Poland. So we're going to split Germany off to have another country, or this German Empire is going to create another country of Poland based in the Polish population and Polish nationality. So again, other independent nations. And then last but not least, number 14 is the League of Nations. A League of Nations formed so that representatives of all participating nations can peacefully settle disputes without resorting to armed conflict, and that the League of Nations will help protect the freedom of participating nations who are threatened by others. So basically, you know what's better than an all-out world war? Talking it out peacefully and not wasting millions of dollars and threatening millions of lives. That sounds like a better idea. And if you're not on board, we're going to shun you and basically protect others from you. If you don't want to be on board with it, then we'll protect the people who are on board. Yeah, right.
So let's say I'm in the League of Nations or
Yeah.
something like that. If I'm having something like a civil war, will that affect my standing in the League of Nations?
Theoretically, no. It would be like you might have to remove yourself for a certain amount of time so that you can deal with your own domestic issues. But then once you're ready to enter the global conversation again, you can come back.
So it's not something that you're forced to be in
Nope.
necessarily?
Nope.
It's not like,
Nobody is forced to be in it.
okay,
Yep.
so you're not like signing a contract, I'll stay in the League of Nations for the next 10 years,
Yep.
no matter what happens.
You don't even have to sign the contract in general. You could just be like, no, F you guys, I don't want to be in it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what if you, so if you do join, what do you have to do?
If you do join, you basically just have to be a part of this global conversation. You have to agree to peace and whenever necessary, and you technically have to protect those who are looking for peace. That's kind of like the guidelines, basically. Okay.
If I was to present everybody.
Yeah. So the 14 points are basically Woodrow Wilson's idea, or Woodrow Wilson's response to, again, not only ending the war, but what should happen afterwards. So Germany comes in, or excuse me, France comes in with their ideas, UK comes in with their ideas, and Woodrow Wilson comes in with his ideas, okay? The next step is basically deciding what stays, what goes, and creating a final copy, okay? So I'm going to go forward from there. So at the actual conference in Paris, after Woodrow Wilson gives this amazing speech and presents these 14 points, talks through most of them, France brings up their side of the story, UK brings up their side of the story. Unfortunately, the Allies completely reject all of Wilson's 14 points, except for the League of Nations. They're like, hey, that last point, like a League of Nations with a bunch of peace between us and, you know, stopping further wars through negotiation, that sounds good. Everything else, nah, not interested, okay? So, you know, not interested in the lifting of the economic barriers. I'm not interested in decreasing the size of my military. I'm not interested in free trade among all of the seas. I'm not interested in any of it, but League of Nations sounds pretty cool, okay? Woodrow Wilson is pretty devastated by this, that he spent years and years kind of building this up. And, you know, I mean, his baby of the League of Nations is still kind of accepted, but the rest of it is thrown away. Be kind of upset, right? Right? I'd be devastated if I wrote this like really awesome idea and everyone just like ignored me. I'd be super sad, right?
It was like a sad ball in the middle.
You threw me off. What they come up with instead is the Treaty of Versailles. So instead of just adopting the 14 points outright, they come together and come up with the Treaty of Versailles. Ryan, what were you gonna say? Yeah. So there are some things that like they kind of agree upon, but they're gonna reword it. But basically, like the outline of the 14 points is like, no, except for the League of Nations.
Became independent in World War II.
They're gonna be real mad about a lot of things. Just you wait.
The first thing they do is take over Poland.
Yes. The first thing they do is walk through Belgium and flip everyone off. Then they take Poland.
It was also to reunite like territory.
Yeah, the German Empire, basically. Yeah.
Because like Poland being independent, there was like
I know how I would
territory.
do it. If I gave a little note saying no school for the rest of the year,
And Mr. Juvenga was like, no. You lay out, you write this paper very nicely, just stating like, hey, this is our ideas about ending school right now, how we should do school going forward. Here's what the rules should be. And Mr. Juvenga just like throws in the trash. That's also fair. Fine. The school board, just like Nick said. Mr. Stockdale just throws it in the trash.
Well, 2 times the charm. Ask God.
Oh my God. All right.
Did you just say my joke?
You say his
You said 3 times the charm. Yeah, 3 times the charm. Germany is gonna get it.
Oh goodness. Okay, so the Treaty of Versailles, let's talk about that for a second then. We went through the 14 points. Let's talk about the Treaty of Versailles, okay? You can condense if you need to. It's already condensed pretty good, but the terms of the treaty, what the Treaty of Versailles has to say, okay? Number 1, demilitarize Germany. Get rid of all German military personnel. Basically stop access to their navy, stop access to any of their supplies that they have. They need all of their toys taken away, basically. They have proven that they can't play nicely, so we're gonna take all their toys away, okay? Number 2, they're grounded. Number 2, give France the area known as the Alsace-Lorraine back. So that area that was taken over by Germany during World War I, France gets it back. That was in the 14 points as well, but they're just going to adopt it in a different way. Okay. Number 3, Germany is forced to pay war reparations or war damages. They are basically forced to pay all of them. And that is the problem. Yes, Sean.
It's not
It's one of those things where, like, if Germany was nicer about it, I bet France would be open to like talking about sharing. But since Germany took it forcefully and France is tired of getting kicked around, that was kind of like France's one little piece of revenge that they get back, because that they get all that land back. That was their part of the compromise. So number 3, Germany is forced to pay war reparations or all of the war damages, basically all of them. Okay. So all of the damages done to French territory, to British territory, to other Allied territory needs to be paid back by back by Germany, at a later determined amount of money. Not only for physical damages, but emotional damages. Basically, they make it so forceful that Germany has to pay for every single funeral. Okay. That's basically how it is laid out. That's a lot of money, okay? Number 4, here's the other big one. Number 4, Germany is forced, not asked, forced to accept and sign something called the War Guilt Clause, which is a piece of paper, a document that states that World War I, all of the subsequent fighting and damages is all Germany's fault.
That sounds like you're playing
They blame everything on Germany. Germany has to take the blame to be able to pay those war damages, and they are forced to sign it. Yes.
And the people part of the war, not the government.
Yeah. Just you guys are bringing up good points. Like, this sounds like you're just blaming somebody to blame somebody. Didn't this start with Austria-Hungary? That's where the assassination happened. The people didn't do anything. The government's the one that entered the war. So what are we doing? Okay? Or the other way around. What are we doing? Okay? So Germany is forced to accept this war guilt clause. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. And then there are 9 new nations that are formed, mostly out of former German Empire land, some from other places that are split from Austria-Hungary and other Eastern European places, including Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Austria, Yugoslavia, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. So Austria-Hungary are 2 separate countries now. Czechoslovakia, Poland, all of those fun things are all independent nations. Yay for independence. Yes. I agree. Nick makes a point of, if they would have followed more things from Wilson's 14 points, it probably wouldn't have led to World War II so heavily. That's not to say it probably wouldn't have happened, but it probably wouldn't have been so abrupt.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the lowering Germany's army.
Yeah.
Would have gave
Lowering it instead of taking it all away,
no,
basically.
taking it all
Yeah.
away would have made it way better.
Yeah. Well, they did. They demilitarized Germany.
Yeah, just taking
For the
all-
whole country, basically, and that's
taking
it.
it all the way.
Yeah.
The way Hitler didn't have any soldiers to fight.
Yeah. Well, soldiers will come out of the woodworks. Don't worry.
Maybe someone had the most strength.
World War II probably also wouldn't like happen or happen at that time if they actually closed it.
Mhm.
What?
Yeah.
Tell me how they're gonna keep up.
Yeah.
Why was Germany forced to sign?
Basically, Germany didn't have another choice. They were so unstable after the war that if they didn't sign it, they were going to get more stuff taken away. So in their mind, that was the only option. Sean brings up a good point. Why would Germany sign this? Why would Germany just be like, yeah, that's fine, I'll make it my problem? Germany was so unstable at the end of World War I that they felt like there wasn't another choice. Their people were starving. They had, millions upon millions dead. Their infrastructure was crumbling. Their economy was garbage. They felt like they had no other choice. Okay. All right. So the last piece of information here. Why does the Treaty of Versailles suck so bad? Okay. So we're already bringing up a lot of problems here, but why does the Treaty of Versailles suck so bad? Okay. First and foremost, obviously, Germany is humiliated. Okay. Germany has like, they are looked down upon for years and years and years because of their actions or because of what the Treaty of Versailles has made of them. And Germans people feels like there's nothing else to do, right? They have people who are literally starving, their economy is garbage, and the fact that they are placed all of the blame of this war that literally is a world war that involved multiple countries, multiple people. Yeah. Yes, but the second one, it's very clearly them. The second one's a little more easier to point. This one, not really. Yeah, basically, yeah.
And they're not only are they humiliated by everybody, they're forced to humiliate themselves by signing that treaty.
Yeah. The German government basically has to say, hey, they are admitting we effed up, even though we didn't actually F up, but we have to take this or it's going to go worse. Okay. Yeah. Number two, sorry, we just got to get through this. Number two, Russia feels absolutely ignored. Russia was a part of the alliance. Russia should have been at that Big Three conference. Russia should have had a seat at the table, but they didn't. Okay. In the eyes of the Big Three, they felt like they were right to keep Russia out of the conversation because they were going through their own stuff. But Russia felt stable enough to be part of that conversation, and they were absolutely ignored. Nothing that they wanted to happen pre or post war happened, and they're kind of humiliated as well. Yeah, Trey.
So basically what we did with France after the Revolutionary War.
Basically, yeah, like we just ignored them whole and said, well, we can handle it. It'll be fine. And Russia's like, no, you did nothing that I wanted. You are completely ignoring my side of the story and my part in this war. Yeah, Emerson. Yeah, so they did. So they left the war, or they had to basically sign this treaty so that they could deal with themselves. But they're basically, or they felt like the Big Three were basically giving them the middle finger for everything that they had done before. They fought 3 out of the 4 years of that war. America only fought like 1.5. So why did America get a seat and not Russia? There was a lot of like, resentment there. Resentment's going to be key here. Okay. The 14 points, number 3, the 14 points talked about colonial territories. Treaty of Versailles didn't. What do we do with the colonial territories now? We're just going to let everyone continue to be ruled without independence. We're going to give these other countries independence, but not the colonies. Everybody hates imperialism anyway. What's the answer? What's the solution? Okay. And then last but not least, they do adopt the League of Nations, or they adopt an idea of the League of Nations that'll be implemented within the next 5 years after the Treaty of Versailles. The United States doesn't even join it. The United States literally came up with the idea of the League of Nations and then doesn't join it because the public of the United States decides they don't want to be involved in any more foreign affairs. But it's just kind of like the cherry on top that the one piece of information or the one idea coming out of the United States, this League of Nations, this baby of Woodrow Wilson, and then we don't even join the League of Nations. It's just the nice little irony of the cherry on top of the end of World War I. Yeah, Sean.
They're leaving Russia like it's that are no more alliance with Russia.
You say they're ignoring Russia like they're not even in the alliance anymore. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, basically. That's basically how it feels. Is that Russia's like, yo, guys, I thought we were still friends. I just had to go do something real quick. Why are you completely ignoring me? I literally just had to go to the bathroom real quick, and you guys straight up. Yeah. And that new government, that new country wanted a seat at the table, and they just got ignored, basically. Yeah. Huh? Oh, yeah, yes. I'll go back to just a second. Yep.
U.S. government has backing, right?
That made me laugh. Why? Like I literally went to the bathroom and you guys left me. You guys went to the next club. What is wrong with you? I can go back anyway. It's gonna be fine. Yeah. Okay, so if you have all this down, you can go ahead and put your notes away. We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to at least give you the assignment that I thought we'd have a little more time with today, but that's fine because we've got time tomorrow to finish it. I want to at least give you this assignment. If you finish it tonight, great. If not, we're gonna have time tomorrow. Tomorrow's our review day for our test on Thursday, so you can spend that time however you need to. But I'm at least gonna give this to you to get you started, okay? I'm gonna go back one for anybody who needs it. Sorry. That's all, folks. All done, okay? So I'll go back to the Treaty of Versailles for anybody who needs it.
Versailles, French word.
Yes, it's a place, but it's used multiple times over multiple wars to talk about treaties.